feel like everybody who was a kid in my era, which would have been the 80s, would have been into Roald Dahl. And that's what I think of. I'm sure we read lots of things, but I remember Roald Dahl more than anything else. I'm just looking, it was the Twits. Look, it's furry now. It wasn't furry in my day. But it was the Twits, the BFG and Matilda, which there. But yes, these books, this one in particular, the Twits, was probably my favourite. Do you know what, looking at it now, there's more words than I remember. I thought it was a smaller book, but it's actually quite a big book. Quite impressed that I read that when I was a kid. But yeah, I would have been really into these. I think these books were the first reading alone without a parent books that took you off into a different world that was really fun and exciting, and I just loved his voice. I definitely want to read these books to my kid. I have a little boy and he's 2, and I read him, I mean at the moment he loves books, and as I'm walking around, there's a children's section over there. I used to go shopping for myself for books, but now I'm walking through going, oh, I want to get that for art, I want to get that for art. He loves trains. I mean, he's just a little boy, thinks trains and trucks and cars are the best thing ever, and animals. I saw one called Tiger Wears a Tutu, or Tiger's Wearing a Tutu, and that's right up his street. Loves tutus, tigers. But yeah, I read him lots of stuff. I try to be really interactive with him when I'm reading to him. So rather than just read the story, I get him to tell me what's in the pictures, and I get him to tell me what's happening. And last night, 'cause we've been quite jet lagged, he woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I get out his book, which is about trains. And I didn't tell the story because he's now telling it to me. He's just worked out how to talk, and therefore I can't shut him up. So after you've read the book once, then he reads it to you, which is quite sweet. But I mean, he obviously can't read. He's not that clever, but he's telling me like what's coming up with all the pictures. So really, in kids' books, like really great pictures is really important. That's why when I looked at this, I was quite surprised, because I can't remember how old I was when I was into Roald Dahl. I just think of childhood, and I'm like, oh, there's a lot less pictures and a lot more words than I remember, which makes me feel like I was a bit cleverer than I thought I was. I'm just going to take these away and just put these like this. That's okay. Is that okay? One of the books that was most formative to me as a writer was Jane Eyre. When I'm writing women, I think about this character all the time. I think what amazes me about this book is how, with a few additions of social media and things like that, you could read this character today and she still seems hugely relevant. And actually, the idea that happiness is more important to her, self-respect is more important to her than happiness in one way. It's the book that I read before I start writing any novel, because it reminds me how I want my characters to feel and how I want my readers to feel about my characters. And not that I've achieved this level of amazing writing, but it's just, I've probably read it 6 times and listened to the audiobook 4 times, and every time I discover something new about this amazing character, and every time I'm impressed by the writing. And also what I think about with Bronte is apparently she went up, I don't know if this is true, this is what someone told me, that she went up to the attic room and wrote this in about 2 weeks. So it's a real lesson in how to just pull your finger out and write books without the influence of social media. But it's just beautiful and it's perfect. And a really fun project for someone to do, I think, would be to just add in touches of modern life and just see how this character still lives very much the same person that she was back then. Did I write The Cows in 2 weeks? I say no. My creative process was different because I had a baby halfway through the process, which really threw a bit of a spanner in the works. But I'm quite quick, and when I eventually got into it, it came out quite quickly. Quite similar to the baby, actually. But yeah, it just took me a while to get started. But I've had to change my writing now to be more of a 9-to-5 job than having all these hours in the day and every day to play with. Now I have Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 to work. So my creative process is a lot more organised now than it used to be. The Cows is about 3 women, 3 very modern women who live in London, who have very different attitudes to motherhood and very different lives. And it's about their journeys to becoming or not becoming mothers. But it's also about 3 women doing what society, not doing what society expects of them. And I wanted to write a book about this fast-growing demographic of women who aren't having children. And for whatever reason that's happening to them, whether it's a choice or not. I wanted to explore in this. But I had a baby halfway through the process, so I had to give one of them a child because I couldn't not write about that whole thing. That's one of the themes. The other theme is public shame and the idea that we all live our lives online and that it's very easy to get into trouble. And one of the characters gets filmed doing something when she thinks she's very alone, and it turns out she's not alone, and this video goes viral and her life gets turned upside down, and the judgment that she faces for the way that she became a mother because she's suddenly now a public figure could potentially ruin her life. But it's a book about taking control of your own existence, and no matter what happens, you have the power to pull it all back together again. So that's kind of what happens. I called it The Cows because a cow's purpose in life is to reproduce and provide milk. And I think there are some echelons of society where people consider the same existence for a woman. I think women are expected to have children, and that's just not how it is anymore. Plenty of women aren't having children, so I wanted to write a book that, you know, showed both. I thought the title, The Cows, says instantly, this is what we think women should be. And when you're thinking about a livestock animal, it feels gross, but actually, when you think about human beings as well, it's equally as gross to say to women, this is supposed to be your role, and this is what you're supposed to do, so they can be a cow about it and not do it. I love writing about female friendships because I think the female bond is incredibly strong, and I'm a very happily married woman, but I couldn't live my life without my girlfriends. It's hard to pinpoint exactly why, but I think when you find good ones, there's a lot of judgment in being a woman. And when you find good friends that allow you to be yourself completely, the freedom that you feel within that relationship is incredibly important. And it's something that's massively important in my life. So I always put elements of friendship into my books because it's just a lifeline. And I think you've got to work at your friendships like you work at your relationships and take them as seriously. So I guess I try to encourage women to make sure that they value that relationship as much as they value their partners. I think about female friendships in books, and what comes to mind is motherhood and women's relationships with their mothers. And I think that does spark what your relationships with your girlfriends will be throughout your life. Like even in Paper Airplanes and Goose, their relationships that they had with their mothers was a huge part of their relationship with women. And as I'm just writing the third one now, still as adults, their relationships with their mothers is playing out every day in their relationships with their friends. So I guess that's your first ever proper female friendship or not with your mother, and that will influence you for the rest of your life. What books have made me laugh out loud? I like this one actually. I like the language. It's quite hoity-toity and quite fun. I like the idea of a mother looking for love. I don't know if it made me laugh out loud, but I thought this was a really fun book. I read that quite recently. What other books have made me laugh out loud? My husband's books, Moon Boy, obviously. I don't read many funny books, that's the honest truth. I like quite dark books. I just read Nina Is Not Okay by Shappi Khorsandi about an alcoholic teenager, and it was right up my street. I don't actually read books to laugh out loud. I read them to cry. I wouldn't pick a book if someone said it was funny. The last book that really made me cry was a non-fiction book about a North Korean refugee called In Order to Live, and I bawled the whole way through. Very emotional about refugees anyway, but what this young girl had been through to live any kind of life was extraordinary, and it read like, if it was fiction, you'd think the author had gone too far. You were like, you've taken this too far, you're being ridiculous. This isn't within the realms of what could possibly happen in the human existence. And the fact that every word was true and she'd battled what she'd battled, I would just be in floods, absolute floods. It was really, really brilliant. If I could only read 5 books for the rest of my life, what would they be? One would be We Need to Talk About Kevin, which I think you read and either love or hate. And I don't know if I loved it, but never has a book stayed with me in the way that did. I literally had to have friends around every day who had read it to talk about it. I couldn't get this out of my head at all. It was so impactful on me. Love Lionel Shriver as a writer. That I would have that. I just automatically thought I'd be on a desert island. I would have that because it really satisfies the dark part of my mind. Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit was my favourite book as a teenager, because I love the alternative character and a character seeking their own happiness, not to please other people. Jane Eyre, because it's just my favourite book ever written. My fourth book would be... Wow, that is a hard question. Can I just have like a vintage fashion book just so I can look at pictures? Just for when I'm sick of being consumed in fiction, I'll just have something pretty. Maybe Yves Saint Laurent, his autobiography, the big one with the pictures, is just stunning. I love that. So I'd have that. And then as my fifth book, do they have to be books I can read, or can I choose a notebook? I'd choose a notebook, because after reading those I'd be feeling emotional and want to write something.